Screen is visible?
I confirm your screen is visible, you are visible, and you are audible.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the cloud security in the broader perspective, and specifically what does the ISO 27017 standard demand. The standard is too comprehensive, so I'm going to tell about a few salient features of the standard. So this is a wonderful thing that has come from ISO body, where they first started this 27001 standard for info security, and this is a delta upon 27001, where it talks specifically about the cloud security part of it. So you know me, I mean, thank you, Liz, you introduced me already. So now, bit overview on this. Before I get in, let me reiterate again. 27017 works only when the organization has already been practicing 27001 requirement. So 27017 is not a standalone set of controls, but in some controls which is tweaked and extended for on 27001 controls, as well as the additional things put in upon that. So that is the one. So any organization deciding to implement 27017 practices should have been already implementing the 27001 practices. Only then the delta applies. So that is expectation from the standard. Now, the weaknesses on the cloud are plenty. I mean, it is not that early. Remember when the systems were on-prem, you had your own data center, you know how the servers were, you know how to safeguard the servers, you know about safe cabling. You had so many things within your control. The moment these data center moves to the cloud, the possibilities that can go wrong is plenty. So what do we do now? Whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but then let us accept the fact that COVID has fastened the migration to the cloud. So we are going to see more things coming from the cloud and not from the on-prem data centers. Things are going to be like this. So that being the case, now everything and anything, the intent of moving to cloud, it is very important that we have cloud as a secure environment. Only when that is there, we know that whatever data we see, we store, we retrieve are all the right data. Else there could be a lot of compromise that could be happening. I'm sure, watch this space, there'll be new moments coming up on the cloud security front as we go forward. Now, I created the word cloud. There are so many things. Something like simple things like a weak password. You could start there. Okay. And from there on, you could go to absence of cryptographic control, inadequate password, inadequate credentials, wrong interfaces. So many things could be going wrong. And which means whenever you're implementing cloud security, you should know that context where you're implementing it. It is not a generic control which you just get in and implement. Things will be perfectly there in place. You should know the context of that implementation. What do I mean by the context? I'll tell you shortly. First, the structure, as I was telling. Okay, the starting point is 27001 requirement. Only with that, what happens is 27002. All of you would know about this. The code of practice, what is given for the 114 controls of Annex A in 27001, that is elaborated in 27002, becomes a code of practice where 27017, the cloud security standard, extends certain control so that they become compliant to the cloud security as well. Organization should be implementing the 27001 control, just get tweaked, and then so that you address the cloud security as well. Apart from this, there is some customization control that the 27017 offers. So you have this 114 control, and then you tweak some of them, extend to cloud security, and add these 7 controls. So you get the overall cloud security controls. There's a structure. Most important, Sanjay was talking about definition by NIST for the risk. So NIST has got various comprehensive things, and one of them, the definition of cloud as per NIST, is that it tells the cloud computing model is for enabling convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. Could be networks, could be servers, could be storage, could be your application on any services for that matter, could be configurable, and that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Okay, remember early days, I used to work for TVS Group in my early of my career. Whenever we want to do the year-end processing, we have to lease out a few servers. Okay, we need extra servers only for that period. We have to raise a purchase order, evaluate the vendors, bring them on-prem, and make them work on all that. Now, think of it, the cloud in place, all that I know is now go back and increase my capability by few more servers. Okay, it is there immediately. So that is advantage. That's what tells about the configurable computing resources that is required as per the cloud. Now, the evolution, okay, see, remember, cloud by term could be new, but by nature, this has been there earlier in different forms. Now it's in a new cup. Earlier, it was started, we had all these happy mainframes. Okay, that was prior to my experience. I started my career in 91 as a programmer, but prior to that, this was mainframe. And then the desktops, laptops came into play. So we are happy with those things. I still remember this in the early 90s where one of the desktops had 40 MB hard disk, and I was wondering, what do I do with 40 MB in hard disk? Oh, that was initially. And then came the client server, which means the processing load was taken by some part by the client and some part by the server. So the load balancing was done. This was the need, so that much of load was not on the client. Something was put on the server as well. Then came a thin client. No, the entire concept changed, where nothing was done on the client side, everything was done on the server side. And then now comes the cloud infrastructure. Now, you don't have to worry where you're accessing from. All that you need is a connectivity to the cloud. Okay, if that is there, you get everything from the cloud as service for you. So this thing, it has been evolving. Now, certain points about the cloud. This is very important that we understand the cloud infrastructure clearly, so that we understand where all things can go wrong. Okay, so the essential characteristics is a broad network access, a rapid elasticity. This is a key term. Elasticity is a term that comes with the cloud, where you can increase, decrease the resources on need basis, and a measured service. Everything is measured. You need a specific processor only for a given point of time. You just have a measured service. Use it for that friend and then leave it out. You don't require to invest in a capex. You don't require to invest a few $1,000 for given hardware. Just no more required. You just take a measured service. And all these things are on-demand self-service. You don't require to call help desk, tell your requirement already. It's there on the site. Just go there, tell your resources, and immediately it's there. And the resource pooling across. So all the resources could be pooled across various people, various organizations. So that's a basic characteristic. The service model, I'm just putting the three popular one. It has gone into different space. Now, okay, the popular things are this SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. Okay, software as a solution, platform as a solution, infrastructure as a solution, and all that as a service. Now, this is the possibilities in the cloud are becoming plenty, and that's why they call this XaaS, anything as a service, is what is coming out now. Anything you name it, probably it is there on the cloud. That's the way things are being. And the good old days of telling the possible services, SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS is gone. Okay, now a lot of new services coming up. That's good. It's going to be. Okay, you can slowly start seeing everything on the cloud. Now, that makes the security on the cloud very, very important. Unless the cloud is going to be a secure space, the comfort of an entity to move into cloud will be very limited. And that is why all these things coming up in terms of talking the cloud security and all that. And deployment models, it could be a private cloud, which means what you saw on-prem is now on cloud, but only for you. Okay, or a public cloud, something which is accessible by all the public and centrally available, could be a public cloud. And sometimes they cut a balance. Some part of it is a private thing, some part is a public cloud. And that becomes a hybrid. And community is the place where people get together. It's sort of the same thing in public, but has a different purpose. These are all the deployment models that could be happening on the cloud infrastructure. What are risk considerations? Okay, when it comes to cloud, the risks are not the same what used to be on a typical on-prem data center risks. They're slightly different. What could be this? First comes the organizational risk in terms of resource planning, your change management, any malicious insiders, how do you handle them and all that. This becomes a challenge. See, change management is one of the biggest things, which probably I'll be talking later, because early days when you're going to do a change, maybe you upgrade a server, you upgrade configuration, you upgrade OS and all that. Everything is within your control. The moment you go to the cloud, the change should encompass all the service providers, including the cloud service provider. Everything should be considered, and then the change should be done. It is not that simple what we used to do for on-prem server. Next, the physical security is where the data is located, the server, storage, network, and all that. See, this is one of the things. If you go and see the cloud cartography, a very interesting term, try to find out what is cloud cartography. This is one of the information what the hackers try to steal, okay, from the cloud service provider so that the attack can be easier for them. So cloud cartography tells where the physical locations of the servers are. And then the popular thing comes about the technological security. This is the obvious one, where whenever you go into anything on the IT, these issues are going to be there. Specifically on the application development, the portability across service providers, the lack of interoperability standards, all these things contribute to the technology security risks. Then the compliance and audit risk. Remember, every government is trying to put in some audit mechanism, some regulatory mechanism, so that the people don't violate. So these things are coming up. The legal challenges, the compliance and audit and business continuity, disaster recovery issues are all coming up. So these things become important. To a fair extent, at least, the business continuity is like taken care when you go on the cloud. But even cloud, remember, a month back, AWS had a problem. It was down for a few minutes. Again, that is a big issue for all the customers. No one thought that AWS can go down, but it happened. Things like that could happen. And these are all the risks pertaining to the cloud. And then, of course, you're concerned about the identity and access management, multi-tenancy risks, backup data privacy, and all that. So these are all only some category of the risks. Still, something could be there beyond this as we evolve. So remember, watch the cloud space continuously. The entire trend is going to be there only. Everything, the business is going to happen on the cloud. And along with that is going to be the challenges for the cloud as well. Certain mandatory things. All of us know about these things. We always talked about the CIA, the confidential integrity and liability. Now comes the privacy as well. As you would know, there is a separate standard for the cloud privacy, the 27018, which works in tandem with 27701, which is also a privacy standard. So these things becomes the important consideration the moment it comes to the cloud security and the data part of it. Now, the data stages itself are three distinct areas. One could be the data in transit, which means the data that is being transferred from one point to the other, and that should be safeguarded. Any possibilities like the man-in-the-middle attack, data sniffing, and all that could be a challenge. And so data in transit should be considered for appropriate security. Okay. So the data is most at risk of being intercepted or being violated for the confidentiality. Data at rest is this very clear, where the storage of data on the identified media. Okay, that is called as data at rest. And this is when data that has been stored on the cloud infrastructure. The main issue in this could be that their loss of control over the data. The data is there, but a customer who has subscribed for some reason is not able to access their data. Okay. Then the onus on defending such attacks goes to the cloud service provider. Whatever data a subscriber is storing on the cloud platform on their media should be accessible at any point in time, and that becomes the responsibility of the CSP. Data in use, this is the processed data. An application using data and doing some processing, that becomes the data in use. And there, the issues might lie in the corruption of data while being processed. Corruption is one possibility. So many things can go wrong. Remember, the moment it becomes a source code, as a programmer whom I started my career, as a programmer, I know so many things are possible. Okay, maliciously, either intentional or unintentional. I have a lot of case studies where people put in Trojan source code in the source code, where they were diverting funds, they were crashing data, they were crashing the servers, things like that. All this could be possible when the data is in use. The highlights of 27017, okay, as I was telling, it provides the guidelines for security controls applicable to provision of the cloud services. So as a cloud service provider and a cloud service customer, the two entities, and this 27017 tells what should a cloud service provider do for securing their environment, what should the customer do to ensure a secure cloud service taken. So both sides, they're told, and I'll surely tell how it is going to look like, and additional implementation guidelines for relevant controls, as I told earlier, for 27002. So 27002 is actually a gold mine of information on how to implement a security control, and that gets
risk prevention and mitigation, which we talked about in the previous slide, in organization.
Yeah. Can I complete this? I'll take the question.
I guess continue, Mr. Ramkumar.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So it provides controls for both the CSP and the CSC, and because it's extension of 27002, the look and feel is the same. The clauses of 5 to 18. Remember that is the A5 to A18 as per the Annex A of 2001, and the clause 5 to 18 as per 27002. Okay, those are the controls. And additionally, there is also Annex A for 27017. The Annex A for 27017 is called as the Cloud Service Extended Control Set. So we have few controls that is specifically given for the cloud controls alone. The new controls, the sound controls, what has been added in 2017, talks about the shared roles and responsibilities. Remember that the devil is in the details. So whenever you want to have a proper security control implemented, you should know who is responsible for what. Okay, I'll tell you shortly a slightly complex scenario what could be there. Next, second control, the additional control talks about removal of cloud service customer assets, and then segregation of virtual computing environments and virtual machine hardening, administrators operational security, monitoring of the cloud services, alignment of the security management for virtual and physical networks. These are the new controls. Due to want of time, I'm not explaining these things. So probably that's a longer session that is required. As of now, all that we record knows, these are the new controls getting added to 2017 beyond what is required in 27001 Delta. Okay, this is the way. And as I told, the guidelines are given for both, for a cloud service customer as well as the cloud service provider. Any control that tells, sometime it is for the both, sometime it's for one of them. In one occurrence, it's the same guideline for the customer and the service provider. Okay, this is the way the 27017 is organized. So each control tells as a customer what should they do, as a service provider what should they do. Interestingly, if you go to any of these sites, the big players in terms of AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, you can see that all the three comply to 27017 as well as 27018. Okay, you can see a lot of information about their compliance, what they have done to comply with the 27017 requirement and 27018 requirement. Now, and the simplest scenario, why in real time it will be really complex, I'm trying to explain quickly. Okay, these are the two entities. You have the cloud service provider, you have a cloud service customer. Life is very happy, if things like this. So the customer subscribes to the provider and then takes a service and lives happily ever after. If that's the case, it's perfectly fine. But now, what happens is, on the cloud service provider side, they may have a subcontractor. Okay, some services given by a third party or to the service provider, who in turn gives it to the customer. And the cloud service customer, who is actually could turn out to be a IT under, who is having a healthcare service hosted on this one, and this entity will have a customer, okay, who is subscribing to this and accessing this data. Okay, now then the same customer also has their own employees, who could be the administrators for the application hosted by the customer on the service provider. So that's the next complexity increasing. Then you will have some service provider whom the customer is engaging. Remember, if this person here can engage as a contractor, same thing can happen. For example, encryption service could be something taken not from the provider, but from a service provider separately. The customer may feel, hey, I think this guy has got a better solution. Let me take it from them. That's a possibility. Okay. Now, we should stop here. Oh, there could be multiple subcontractors on both sides. So what I'm putting here is possibly the simplest complex scenario. Okay. Amongst the various complexities, this is the simplest possible scenario. It is not just the CSP and the CSC, but many players coming on either sides. Oh, now what is the problem here? The problem here is everyone here, the subcontractors, the service providers, the customers, the employee, the CSC, CSP, should clearly know what is their responsibility. If the responsibility is not known, implementing the control may not happen. If the controls are not implemented, there could be a compromise on the service. So that is why understanding the entire roles, the actors that are there in this scenario, and what they contribute and what they're responsible for makes it very, very important, so that appropriate control can be implemented for each one of them. Now, the cloud specific concepts, okay, this is where it starts. Okay, I'm going to tell few controls that's being given this standard. First is, okay, engaging your vendor, who is a cloud service provider, should happen as per the A15. The 27001 has got a control A15 on supply management. All the engagement of the cloud service provider should happen as per this control, is the expectation of 27017. And the cloud service customer should be able to meet all their ISMS goals. Remember, as an organization, cloud service customer will have some defined security goals, whether you do the entire thing in-house or you do it in outsource on a cloud. Whichever way, the goal of security should be met. Okay, that's expectation of the standard. And the cloud service provider should provide services to enable the customer meet their goals. Okay, that's it. The standard is very, very clear. It states the same thing as per the control. The cloud service provider should understand what are the security requirements of the customer and make them meet the same, is the expectation. Wherever the CSP cannot meet the customer's goals, okay, they tell, sorry, we don't have service like that, then it becomes the customer's responsibility to implement additional controls. The customer cannot go and tell the end customer, hey, look at it, my service provider is not having this control, so I can't help it. Cannot be an excuse given. The customer should put in some additional controls so that the overall security is met. And finally, both the cloud service customer and the provider should have strong risk management practices in place. This is what Sanjay was telling. So that's a starting point for any organization implementing any controls. First, the risk management. Risk management in terms of the cloud security comes into the play for this. So these are things what the standard demands when they implement 27017. Now, I'm just giving an example, the roles and responsibilities. So the activity, every activity will have multiple. I'm trying to simplify. The cloud service customer and the provider. Remember the early slide, what I told you? There could be several roles, okay? And it's very important you tell the activity and who's going to be responsible for what, okay? Only when this is very clearly defined, you'll be able to put in appropriate control to the appropriate actor that could be engaging in this entire transaction. So that is why a proper definition of roles and responsibility becomes very, very clear. So this is just the simplest possible example I'm putting here. Next comes the inventory of assets. On both sides, the cloud service customer as well as the provider side, it is very important they have a clear inventory of the assets, what they hold and where they store. For example, the cloud master detail, customer master could be on the cloud, okay? Employee details could be on-prem, on their own servers. Help desk tickets could be on the cloud. This is an example where these assets are getting stored. This asset will become important. Same way, as a cloud service provider, they may have, remember, these are all clear tenancy where there's a clear demarcation of whatever data is being stored, and data between client A, B, and C are stored separately, and their own data gets stored separately. The possibility of one asset accessing others should never be there. That is one of the key requirements as per the 27017 standard. Now, the access control, okay, user registration, deregistration, and access. Many times, okay, this is a service hosted by the service provider. So there is a provision, a service which talks about the user administration. All that is required is this request comes from the customer side, where they tell what is the registration details, what is the deregistration details, what is the access point details, and all that. All this goes from the customer to the service hosted by the service provider, and the standard tells there has been a confirmation, an acknowledgement coming back from the provider to the customer. This expectation. So what would have been done earlier in-house is now on the cloud, and on the cloud, the service provider should have a service given to them so that they use the service and do all these, registration, provisioning, registration, all that, and all that required from the provider side is that this is acknowledging, yes, you raise this ticket and this is completed, and this is not done, this is failure and this is success. Sort of things should be communicated back to the customer. So the action happens on this side and the results on the other side. Now, another control talks about the authentication techniques. Very important that between two users, a standard user and the admin user, which means a privileged account, the validation has to be different. Okay, simply by saying this, you can see that when it's a standard user, you may have minimal validation. Okay, and then access gets enabled. But the moment they are a privileged user, you may have multiple validations required. Typically, multi-factor authentication. The trend is improving. Early used to be only login ID and password. Then the login ID, password, and the dongle came in. Then the login ID, password, dongle, and the biometric is coming in. Now the login ID, password, biometric, possibly the fourth component that will be coming shortly is the GPS, your geolocation. Okay, one, unless the person is in proximity of a given asset, the system will not enable them to log in. So multi-factor authentication is also becoming more complex. I don't know if it's going to make the life easy or tough for the people, but that's the way controls are coming up. And now the current trend they call is the zero trust security, zero trust. Okay, there's nothing given by default. Things are given only on demand, on approval. By default, no access comes. So zero trust also increases the load on the people, but that comes because the need of the business for security could be very high. And that's the reason this multiple validations keeps happening. As I told about change management, okay, see, early days was very, very simple. Okay, as I told, every server, we can see the servers. I can go to walk into a data center, I can see the servers. I know so many servers are there, but these are things to be done. And I was very happy doing manual change management. I know what is the patch update. I do it from the network. I log into all my servers, ensure at the non-business hours, the patches are updated. It's a happy, peaceful life. The moment you go into the cloud, things become slightly complex. Unless the service provider and the customer are going to work in tandem, okay, the changes could create more trouble than a solution. So that is why it is put over here. Whenever a change is made, when the customer, for example, wants to move from one OS to the other, they cannot do it on their own. They have to inform the service provider and then tell the expectation and see whether the service is possible on the product side. And only then the movement can happen, the migration can happen. Same way the service provider, they want to change encryption methodology, then they have to intimate the concerned customers and only then change it. You can't change it at the whims and fancies. So change management is a very complicated job involving a lot of stakeholders and has to be done with utmost care. Okay, that's why.
Ramkumar,
yeah.
I'll have to pitch in between because we'll just take one or two audience question and would wrap up. I'm so sorry. I understand it's such an important.
Yeah. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. So these are a few things which I wanted to tell. Otherwise, yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate your understanding and love the session. So much of learning. Quickly moving into two questions that has come in. Samit BRC is asking, the biggest challenge is to understand how to implement. Any guidelines or documents about exact implementation on the ground?
Of course, unless we know the context, it is very tough. See, there is just impossible thing where we have some standard guideline which could spoon feed a solution for the enterprise, because the real enterprise scenario, as you gave a sample, is pretty complex. So we should take a guideline from given the standard or the model and then try to implement in that context. So, I mean, it will be good that we fail somewhere here and there, we get a better knowledge, and that will make us a more knowledgeable person on these things. There is no otherwise any predefined standards which could fully help enterprise. It comes by experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramkumar. I'll quickly move to the next question from Mohammed Habib, and he asks, how can we control one's unauthorized authentic access?
That's why I told about the zero trust. So what happens is any login has to be validated. There is nothing by default, nothing like a guest login, no guest login, nothing. Every login ID is clearly identified. Only when successful login ID, password, biometric, dongle is all used. When you put in more controls, then the login gets validated. So that's the only way. Having zero trust implemented, you ensure that people are giving the credentials appropriately, and that will make you get into the system. That's the only way out.
Thank you. Last question. Any book suggestions for A to Z of data privacy by Sri Sri? Book suggestion.
Quite a lot of books, quite a lot of books. See, it would be inappropriate to tell only few books which are good. There are quite a lot I could tell you. But the challenge happening is that books sometimes become outdated. You buy a book and then you suddenly feel that the concepts there are outdated, so that you have to update yourself. So one mechanism is subscribing to some groups on LinkedIn or appropriate forums, which could keep telling you about info security. And I mean, since the book question came up, I have some very interesting book. This is also a book which could be well used for any IT security audit. This includes cloud security audits, things like this. I mean, this is also one of the wonderful references. There are quite a few like this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramkumar. And Alvin Integrated Services has actually made me a bad cop for today, because I see on the chat that everyone wants to listen to you more. They have seen that a few slides have been missed, and I am so sorry if I read out the names. Ruben, Anirudh, Pankaj, Abhijit, that the session has been limited. We have to respect all our speakers who are out here, and we have great discussions coming up. So a round of applause. Amazing session. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. With this, I do have another co-host for today. If the audience has forgotten, Mr. Madhusudan Madhuji is going to take us to our next session, and that is going to be our first panel, and he is going to make it interesting. The virtual stage is